We are discussing constructivism today, so let's jump right in. Constructivism is a psychological and philosophical perspective contending that individuals form or construct much of what they learn and understand. So this is basically telling us that individuals form or construct their own knowledge internally from their environment, from what they see around them. What they learn is something that they construct or form on their own. This is different from acquiring knowledge or just performing a behavior that someone has taught us. This is developing our own knowledge. Some core assumptions and beliefs of constructivism are, first of all, that people are active learners and that they develop knowledge for themselves. So this is going to, again, go off of what we just discussed. People are going to be active learners and they are developing knowledge on their own. This is not knowledge that is being given to them from a teacher. This is knowledge that they gather from the environment, from their social interactions for themselves. Another key point is that emphasis is going to be placed on integrated curriculum. This is because students learn better when they are given a context and when their learning is meaningful. So, by teaching integrated curriculum through themes where students are answering a big idea or a big question as they go throughout the unit and are focusing on that whole that is then broken into parts in various classes, that is going to help them construct more authentic knowledge because they have background knowledge, they have context, it's all focused together and it seems more meaningful. Third point is that teachers should structure situations such that learners become actively involved with the content. So this is going off of the idea that we want our learners to be actively involved with what we're teaching. We're not going to give them a lecture or directly give them instruction. Instead, learners are going to be involved in experiments, field trips, working with manipulatives, engaging in debates and discussions and collaborative learning. They should be actively involved with the content and the concept that is being taught. Lastly, the world can be constructed in many different ways and no version is more correct than another. This is going to go off of the idea that students each construct their own knowledge, and they're going to construct their knowledge in different ways based on their different background knowledge, based on the different ways that they experience their environment, and no version is more correct than another. So we are basically asserting that every student's truth, every student's knowledge that they have constructed is equally valid. So as you can see, this is going to be more relative than other theories that we have discussed. There's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. Students create their own answer from what they have experienced. Now we are going to take a brief look at constructivism versus other models that we have studied so far. So I have broken this down into questions that we are going to ask about each theory, see how each theory answers those questions, and that will help us determine how constructivism is similar or different from the other theories. Our first question we're going to look at is, how does learning occur? Behaviorism answers this question by saying that learning takes place when a stimulus provides a desired response. So when we see that behavior that we have been wanting to see, that observable behavior that we have been training for, we know that learning has occurred. Cognitivism is going to take a different approach, and they say that learning takes place through the acquisition of knowledge. So we are looking at brain-based learning. Whenever knowledge is acquired, then we know that learning has occurred. Constructivism takes a different approach yet again, and it says that learning takes place through social interaction. So rather than learning through a stimulus and providing a desired response or acquiring knowledge from around us, we are going to construct our own knowledge through the environment, through experience, and through social interaction. Next, we're looking at the question, what is the role of the teacher? A teacher that is operating under the theory of behaviorism is going to dispense knowledge and the students are going to absorb it. So this is going to be the traditional lecture. Students take notes, students just listen. They are passively absorbing the information. Cognitivism is going to have a little bit more emphasis on student-centered learning, but the teacher is still the main focus. The teacher is giving out the information, students are receiving it. The teacher presents information in an organized manner and provides learning strategies to help the students organize the information. This is going to be more student-friendly than behaviorism, but as you can see, the emphasis is still on the teacher and the knowledge that the teacher is providing to the students. This is where constructivism is going to be completely different from either of the two theories that we have discussed. In constructivism, the teacher takes a background role. The teacher is the guide, and she provides scaffolding or support for students, but the whole goal is for students to achieve independence. She is on the side asking questions, helping students think, guiding them so that they construct their own knowledge. So going right into that is the role of the student in each of these theories. With behaviorism, the student is passive. Since the teacher is giving out all the knowledge, the student is passive, absorbing information from the teacher. Cognitivism, student is an active learner, so they are engaging in learning. They're storing information that's going to be recalled later. Students will, possibly work in groups. They're going to be working to learn strategies to help themselves organize information and to help themselves recall. Constructivism, the student is again an active learner, but the student is taking on a role of discovery and they're going to construct their own knowledge. So the student is taking the lead with constructivism. It's very much based on what the student already knows and where the student needs to go from there to construct more knowledge. Our next question, how is learning measured? So learning is going to be assessed or measured mainly through tests under behaviorism. It's going to we just need to see that students can demonstrate the desired behavior or skill that we wanted them to be able to demonstrate. Cognitivism is going to be through recall, so we again might see some traditional looking tests, but we're basically concerned that students are able to recall the information or skills that they have learned. So this could take on different forms such as a project or a presentation where students are describing what they have learned. It's going to be, again, about the recall. Constructivism is again different from either of these two in that it's really difficult sometimes to even measure learning because students can construct their own knowledge. So students might go through the same activity and take away something completely different. So a lot of times something that could be used would be something like a portfolio or a demonstration. Portfolios, I think, are really useful because it's focusing on specific students and their growth. So we're seeing the knowledge that student constructed, it's staying true to the theory, and that students are forming their own knowledge, and it's based on their growth is how we are measuring their learning. Last question that we're going to discuss is, what does instruction look like? Instruction is going to look different for each theory. In behaviorism, instruction looks like the desired behavior is demonstrated or the information is given out, and then it's repeated and practiced until students can perform the behavior automatically or with automaticity. So we're going to see lots of drills, practice, lots of repetition until students are able to complete the task with ease. Cognitivism is going to be different. Again, remember, our teacher is still presenting the information, but it's going to be chunked into small steps that build on each other. So there's going to be a lot of focus on building the prerequisite and prior knowledge so that students can add on to that and use strategies and skills that they've learned to grow and to acquire new knowledge. There will be tools such as graphic organizers to organize the information. Again, a major part of it is activating prior knowledge, chunking, building on what students have already learned. Constructivism is also going to place an important role on prior knowledge, but it's going to be a little bit different. Students participate in problem-based learning or discovery learning as the teacher is going to assist with guiding questions. Students could frequently collaborate with others, and the curriculum is going to be integrated whenever possible. So it's going to be much more hands-on than either of the other two theories allow for, and the students will start in different places, possibly based on their prior knowledge and how much they know going in. They're going to construct different knowledge based on the knowledge they have going into the scenario. We are going to now discuss two major theorists of constructivism. Our first one is going to be Piaget, and we are focusing on his theory of equilibration. Equilibration refers to a biological drive to produce an optimal state of equilibrium between cognitive structures and the environment. So what this means is that biologically we have a natural urge to make what we are observing, what we see in our environment, match what's in our brain. And disequilibrium occurs when the beliefs that we have don't match what we're seeing in reality. And equilibration attempts to correct the conflict through one of two ways. So essentially what's happening is we have a natural desire for what we see to match what's in our head. When something shifts that or a conflict occurs, that's disequilibrium, and we want to fix that. Our equilibration drives to fix that through either assimilation or accommodation. So our first example is going to be, our first term is assimilation, and that is when we are fitting external reality to the existing cognitive structure. So that's when we take what we see in the world and make it match what's in our head. And sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't match up quite right. So if we took the example of a child riding in a car, and she's riding along and she sees a field of cows. She's never seen a cow before, but she knows what a horse is. So she looks at the cow and says horse. So what she has done is she has taken an external reality that she doesn't know what it is. It doesn't match anything that's in her head. And she has fit that reality into her existing schema or cognitive structure. Accommodation takes that a step further, and a lot of times these will follow one another. Accommodation is when we change the internal structure to provide consistency with the external reality. So if we refer to that same example, if the child's mother were to say, "No, sweetheart, that's not a horse, that's a cow," then the child would be changing the internal structure to match reality. So now her cognitive internal structure matches what exists in reality. Our next theorist that we're going to focus on is Vygotsky. Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist who contended that humans have the ability to alter the environment for their own purposes. So he is differentiating humans from animals based on what they are able to do with their environment. Animals are not able to change the environment. They can adapt themselves so that they can survive in the environment, but they cannot physically change the environment for their own good. He's stating that humans can do this, so they are different from animals. He also emphasized the importance of meaningful social interaction. So Vygotsky is going to be adamant on the fact that we learn and construct the most knowledge when we are engaging with others. So whether we are engaging with adults or people more advanced or peers that have different perspectives or might know more than us, that's how we're going to gain the most knowledge, is by interacting with those people in the world who can give us more knowledge and information. That's where we get the principle that knowledge is constructed by two or more people, because we're going to learn more from others than we would by just stepping into the environment on our own. So we're going to see this come to light in things like internships and apprenticeships, which Vygotsky would have advocated. When you are going into the environment of the job that you want and you are working closely under someone who's more experienced, you're going to be able to construct the most valuable knowledge for that situation, because you're in the environment, you're going through experiences, and you are working in a real world scenario with someone who knows more about that profession or that field. Next is the idea that self-regulation is developed through internalization of actions and mental operations that occur in social interactions. That's a lot. So what that means is that we internalize or we take in the actions and mental operations that occur in social interactions. So the way that we interact with people, the way we see others interact with certain things and perform certain processes, allows us to take in that information and then self-regulate or talk ourselves through processes in the future. Lastly, Vygotsky suggested that human development occurs through cultural transmission of tools. So language, we learn from culture around us. We learn language and symbols, and that language is going to be the most important tool. That's because language is going to allow us to construct knowledge, and more importantly, what this is really referring to is that language is going to lead to our private speech or our own construction of knowledge that we are going to get to later. So language is something that we take in from others, and we are taking in others' languages, and then eventually we are able to produce our own language or construct our own knowledge. We're going to speak more about private speech a little bit later on. All right, we are going to briefly look at three major components of Vygotsky's theory. Our first major point is the zone of proximal development, or the ZPD. So this is probably one of the most crucial aspects of Vygotsky's theory, and this is taking the student's independent level, or we could call it I, and adding one to it. So what we're focusing on is what students can do on their own, and then as teachers, we want to add to that one. We want to up the difficulty level a little bit to push students, and so that we are actually providing help to them. So we don't want to take it too high where the students will become frustrated, but we want to challenge them. We shouldn't be instructing them on something they already know how to do on their own. That's not much use to them. We want to hit that sweet spot of just a tad above them where we're helping, where they need our support to give them valuable information and skills, but it's not too easy, not too hard. Next, we're going to touch on scaffolding. That is the temporary support provided to students with the goal of moving them towards greater understanding and independence. So scaffolding is going to be used right along with the zone of proximal development. So while we are at that ZPD, one above where our students are, we're going to provide them scaffolding to help them get to where they can do that on their own. So we're providing them with instructional strategies that are going to help them have support to gain the level of understanding that they need. And then as students are able to do that, the scaffolding is going to come away. And then students are going to have a greater independence level, and the cycle repeats. So we want to teach now a more difficult skill. So we're going to go in again, the zone of proximal development, one higher from where the student can do it on their own. We're providing scaffolding. Students eventually don't need the scaffolding. It goes away, and the cycle repeats. Lastly, we're touching on private speech, and this is the speech that is spoken to oneself for self-regulation. So this is what we say to ourselves as we're going through tasks, and we're going to see this most often with children around ages 4 to 7 as they're engaging in tasks. Sometimes they're playing, they're trying to do something on their own that maybe they find challenging, and we might notice them talking to themselves. They're working themselves through how to do something with speech. This is not speech for anyone else to hear. It's their own speech. It's not for communication. It's for self-regulation. And as we get older, or as children age, the private speech tends to go away, but we still have this same type of thing in our minds. It becomes covert, and it's our thought process as we are attempting to do things. We walk ourselves through what to do, through how to act with our thoughts. And again, as adults and older children are doing an especially difficult task, that private speech might reemerge, and you might talk to yourself a little bit, but generally it's going to be in your thoughts. And this private speech is going to help children be able to more effectively perform processes. So it has been shown that For example, performing math operations, students that, speak privately to themselves or think to themselves as they're going through that process ends up constructing more knowledge and retain the information better. This is going to be the same for readers. I see this in my classroom. Students that, have that conversation to themselves as they're reading, they're asking themselves questions about the characters, about why events in the book are happening. They are better readers. They're going to grasp the information a lot better than students who are just passively reading to read. So that private speech, that dialogue within oneself is a very important component of Vygotsky's theory, and that's why earlier I had mentioned language being the most important tool. That's why, is because we need language in order to self-regulate and to construct the most knowledge possible out of the situations that we experience. Now we're going to look at a couple of examples of constructivist learning. So our first example is going to be one that revolves around integrated curriculum. So I'll just read the example and then we'll discuss how this example would be an example of constructivism. So a 7th grade teaching team plans a unit on Greco-Roman culture. Teachers plan how students will study this theme in each class. Students will learn about Greek and Roman civilizations and social studies. In language arts, they'll read Greek tragedies and myths. In science, students will learn about scientists from the era and their theories. In math, students will apply principles of Greco-Roman architecture and geometry. My school actually does a project like this, so I should have added geometry in there, to make blueprints and construct catapults. In art class, the students will look at art pieces from the era and create their own pieces. In PE, students will participate in some of the ancient Olympic events. And to finish the unit, students will research Greek cuisine and prepare a dish to share at a Greek festival the grade is hosting. Students will present some of the projects that they have created, and some will perform a tragedy for the rest of the student body. So we want to look at how this is constructivism. Integrating curriculum is a strategy used by constructivists to give context to content. So as I had mentioned earlier with, having that one overarching theme that students are revisiting over and over, it's going to help them construct more relevant real-world knowledge. This context provides a more meaningful environment for the students, and students are more likely to construct valuable knowledge when concepts are reinforced throughout the curriculum. So we're looking at the whole of the Greco-Roman culture, and then in each class, students are looking at a specific part of that culture. And that's a really key idea in constructivism, is taking the whole first, looking at it holistically, and then breaking down the parts. And integrated curriculum lends itself to holistic teaching really well. All right, our next example is going to be the use of scaffolding, which we just talked about with Vygotsky. So our example for this is a language arts teacher wants her students to write an argument essay. She's concerned with the students understanding the structure of the essay, so she provides students with an outline for them to follow. She also reads the text with students and helps them pick out the reasons to support their thesis in a counterclaim. She displays these on an anchor chart for students to refer to. Students are able to focus on the essay structure as the information to put into the essay is provided for them. So what's happening is that students are able to focus only on how they are forming their paragraphs, how they are structuring the essay. They're not having to worry about the correct order. The outline is provided for them, and they're not having to spend too much time in the text figuring out what information to put in the essay. That's provided. The scaffolding is to allow them to focus only on the structure of the essay at this point. As students master the structure of the essay, the teacher provides fewer resources for students. The next time they write an essay, she provides them with an outline, but students are responsible for reading the text and picking out reasons in a counterclaim on their own. Eventually, students are able to write an argument essay without any assistance from the teacher. How is this constructivism? Scaffolding is again a central strategy of constructivists, and the teacher is providing support to the students so that they can develop a deeper knowledge. So if we were referring to the zone of proximal development, maybe the students know how to write, but they don't know how to write an argument essay. So we're going in at I+1. but students are not quite where we want them to be. They can't write this essay on their own, so we are providing them with scaffolding, and eventually the student's mastery grows and the teacher is gradually withdrawing the support. So this is building on Vygotsky's theory that, again, zone of proximal development scaffolding, and that's what lends itself to constructivism. Lastly, we're going to take a look at an example of collaborative learning. A teacher wants students to attain some background knowledge on what the Holocaust was. She provides articles for students to choose from. Students pair up in groups of 4. Each member of the group reads a different article. After students glean information independently, they share what they learned with their group. The group decides which information is the most important and prepares a poster to share information with the rest of the class. How is this constructivism? So we've established that constructivism places a large emphasis on what students can learn from their peers. So anytime we see collaborative learning, that is going to be a technique that constructivism promotes. Students construct knowledge during social interactions. We talked about that. And by interacting with their peers to pick out important information, students are able to construct their own knowledge about the event that they researched. And I'm sorry I messed up briefly on the PowerPoint right there. But again, social interaction is going to lend itself to constructivism. Students are researching with classmates, and that's allowing them to construct their own knowledge, which would be different than if the teacher were just telling them about the Holocaust. They're figuring it out for themselves and sharing it with their classmates. So that is going to wrap up this lecture on constructivism. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and see you next time.